is home games. That's Steve Milton from the Hamilton Spectator. That is Rick Zamprin from 900 CHML Radio. I'm Scott Radley from the Hamilton Spectator and 900 CHML. You'll notice Bubba O'Neill's still not with us. He is still recovering. He will be back. We are waiting for him to get back, but the day is coming. But for today, there's still three of us. Rick Zamprin, we learned last week, a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, a shock, in fact, to some people, that the Toronto Rock, the very successful for many, many years lacrosse team in Toronto, National Lacrosse League, that started in Hamilton once upon a time, is moving back to Hamilton. Will it work here?
Well, for them, I hope so. And I think for lacrosse fans, I hope so as well, because they have a great following. They've had a great following for years in Toronto. But the question is, they're still called the Toronto Rock. They're playing in Hamilton. And I'm not sure that's going to fly with Hamilton fans, whether they're lacrosse fans or sports fans or just want, something to do post-pandemic even. I don't know if there's going to be that buy-in, to be honest, because as we know, we don't hate Toronto, but we look at them differently because of the Ticats Argos rivalry and the two cities being bitter rivals, whether it's sports or business or whatever the case is. I think when we boil things down to what's going to be successful, is it going to be successful in the stands? I don't think we're going to see a packed First Ontario Centre. Is it going to be a success financially? I think they're hoping that Saturday night games will be, a huge factor because they weren't allowed to play Saturday at home, obviously when the Leafs are at Scotiabank Arena. So I think the term success there's going to be some gray area there. I don't think they're going to make a lot of money. I don't think they're going to have a lot of people in the stands, but I think they will be an entity that is going to be around for a long, long time.
What do you think, Steve?
I think they'll be here, and I agree with all the points in principle that were said there by Rick. They'll have to make a compromise somehow on home games with some identification with the city that's beyond playing there, and they'll do a lot of stuff, and I don't know what it'll be, but I think they might have been taken a little aback, and they were warned a bit in advance, saying, "Hey, you should recognize the fact that it's Hamilton." That was part of the problem the first time around. But this is a whole different league. This is a whole different league, a whole different team. It's a whole different brand, and I get what they're at. They have millions of dollars sunk into this brand. So I think the biggest problem in terms of fans will be the fringe fans that can put you from your base over to to get your big games of 12 to 15,000 people, and many of those may have to come from Hamilton. Maybe they don't. Maybe they come from Burlington. Maybe they because really outside of the city proper, not that many people. I mean, even a lot of times people who live in Ancaster, they think of themselves more as Ancaster people than Hamilton, and Dundas more than Hamilton, and all of those Grimsby, all of those kinds of places, the regional places will come, and people who are living in Hamilton or Hamilton born and bred and are already Toronto Rock fans, I don't think it'll stop one of them from coming to the game. Not one.
Yeah, I don't think if you're a fan, this is going to be a deterrent to you. I don't. But
how many are there?
Say that again.
How many are there?
Well, how many are there? How many are willing to make the drive down the QEW, especially if you were coming from Whitby or from Oshawa or somewhere else? The name, we'll stick with the name for just a second here, because it clearly is an issue. And like every interview that the owner did, the name was front and center. Mm-hmm. And I think the name doesn't deter, as Steve says, anybody who is already a fan from coming. But I think it's it's not necessarily a way to ingratiate yourself to the casual people who might otherwise decide they want to take a little look at this thing. The other issue that I think is an even bigger one here is and I think the name will matter, but ultimately we'll see. The bigger issue is going to be, there are an awful lot of people, even though lacrosse is our national sport, who have never ever seen a game. One of our national sports. They've never seen a game. And it's a fantastic sport, but the challenge is going to be, how do you lure people down there? And I don't know the answer right now, because the AHL couldn't lure people down to First Ontario Centre for the most part, once in a while. Rick, what's the magical elixir that lacrosse has, or this league has, or this owner has, that is going to convince all the people around here who have never tried lacrosse as a viewer sport to come down?
Well, I think number one, the Rock franchise is banking on most of their hardcore fans in the GTA to come to Hamilton. So I think we can give a check mark. They're not all going to come because some of them are going to say, I just don't want to make the drive. I don't want to go to Hamilton, right? You know, they have that perception that Hamilton is still that, you know, dirty, dark, dank kind of downtown place. And it's not. I mean, it has been, you know, revitalized to the best of, you know, the city's ability. I think the hurdle is going to be that it's not the Maple Leafs, it's not the Raptors, it's not the Blue Jays. They might taste it and they might like it. They might go back, you know, a few times, but are they going to buy season tickets? Are they going to turn into hardcore fans? That's the major hurdle for any franchise, really, especially one that's relocating that has a fan base in another community. So I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle for this team.
I had long talks this week with all the previous people involved in the Raiders and the Rock, not so much the Raiders, but the Rock in their early years.
For those who don't know, the Raiders were the Rock before the Rock.
Just sure. That's why this
when
is,
they were in Hamilton.
This is why this is something. And of course, they're called the Ontario Raiders. And that was a bigger deal then. It wasn't the number one reason. It was, I would say it was the number three reason that it didn't succeed here. The first was the way it always is. And this is what I'm going to come to right now. Investment, money. Did you have the money? And this is what the CPL and why in some ways the CFL is still standing, where if the pandemic had happened to them 15, 18 years ago, the CFL would not be standing today. It'd be done. Why? Because there's a little heavier paper in it now. It's being taxed very hard. You've got to have the investment. So you got to be investment to be able to weather the storm so that you can build. But secondly, you better be ready. And this is where the Fords were great. We said the same thing. People here, you know, among us in sports had said, we don't know if people come down to watch soccer. Well, some people did. And the Forge was ready for them. They were ready for them with the kind of game they played, the kind of promotions they had, how the place looked for a big stadium that only had, you know, I think the first game was, I forget how many, 15, 16 in it, and they gave away those tickets basically. And they were ready for them. And they had and they were ready competitively and all those kinds of things. And that's one thing about the Rock. I mean, they got a championship style kind of roster right now. They don't have a draft choice this year, and they don't even care. So you better be ready. And that first game, or the first few games, when you start loss leaders giving away seats or whatever the promotion is, be ready. It's gonna be tough because Cops Coliseum is not, or First Ontario Center is not Tim Hortons Field. I mean,
well, you know, one of the really interesting things about this city that I've always been fascinated by is that the sports fans here very clearly they will go to events. Yes. They do great, and they will generally go to any team that is considered playing in the highest level in the world. So the Ticats are the highest level of CFL football. So they will go to that. But, you know, AHL hockey, they didn't really love so much.
But lacrosse is but the NLL is, but there's nothing even close.
That's what I mean. So the NLL, by definition, is the highest level in the league. So it's going to be fascinating to see if people accept that or see it that way and say, this is the NHL of lacrosse. This is the NBA of lacrosse. We have a big league team here. But, Steve, I think it's to your point. I think that is on the ownership and the management to sell it that way, to make sure that everybody who's the casual doesn't really follow lacrosse understands this is the best in the world.
How do you do that? And that's one of the things that I think is very different than we were last time here. There's less, even though there is more media. You made this point many times, Radley, on the show that it's fragmented media that we're in now, particularly in sports. And how do you make sure, like for instance, the outlets that we work for, plus Bubba's outlet, just absolutely dominate it and seem to have lots more time and lots more space for these kinds of things 20 years ago. I mean, we just gave the Rock or the Ontario Raiders all kinds of coverage. We had a columnist and a writer almost at every game. And you know, we advance it all that kind of. Well, we don't have the kind of space or the manpower to do quite as much of that anymore. And I suppose it depends on whether there's radio rights and TV rights, those kinds of things. So how do you make sure you get those messages out? Because the messages that they do get out from the NL, it's really good and it's really professional. I don't know if you've ever seen any of their stuff. Part of it going back to the heritage of the game, the thousands of year old heritage of the game, but also part of it there's some really well shot. It's like NFL films type of things. How do you get those out?
Rick, to that point, and I want you to jump in on that one. Will the Toronto Rock get the same Toronto media coverage, Sportsnet, TSN, now that it's in Hamilton? I mean, not even Toronto coverage, national coverage, because that's a risk they may run as well.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to believe, especially on a consistent basis. If they're doing, a national championship or maybe, the Final Four, yeah, they'll get that. But on a week-to-week basis, it's just not going to happen. The dollars and cents don't make sense, even post-pandemic, because we know that, sports viewing across the board, whether it's NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, has been down during the pandemic, which is kind of hard to believe. But, streaming has taken off. More people are watching news, and, the numbers are stark. They're black and white. Whether it's the NBA Finals or the Stanley Cup Final, massive drop in viewership. And I think, are we going to ask people to watch lacrosse, something that they're not used to watching, especially on a weekly basis? They may have seen it on TV from time to time. They may have gone to some games, but I don't think the major networks are going to suddenly pick up the phone and say, hey, we now want to broadcast Toronto Rock lacrosse.
Let's go back 1 second here, just as we wrap. Let's go back to the name for a second. What are the chances, Steve? You mentioned the Forge, and when you said that, it tweaked. You could name this team simply the Rock. You don't even have to. You can take the Toronto, you can take Hamilton and call it the Rock, unless that's trademarked by the Rock, which I don't know. We'd have to look into that. But
well, I'd get him involved in a second if I were them. Like, just say, make a quick call to the guy and say, hey,
is that inevitable? Do you think that's inevitable? That
I think it's inevitable.
The Rock.
Well, because of the CFL connection. I think it's inevitable. I mean, I think you hook up with the, if they're smart, they'll hook up with everybody in town here. They'll talk to the Ticats, and I'm sure that, Andelauer would, probably like, I don't know, he's not investing in this at all, from what I hear, but doesn't mean he doesn't want the team here. And for those Mike Andelauer's the owner of the Bulldogs. So it's what's good for that arena is probably good for the Bulldogs as well. It keeps the lights on. Plus, it also gets people more aware of the arena. That's the Ticats theory about everything that goes on at the stadium as well. So yeah, I would think you've got to. That's going to be the first compromise. And you know what? Saying we made a mistake about this, it can't hurt them a little bit. Like, let's see what happens.
Just say we listened. We listened and
exactly.
we heard.
Yeah, maybe don't even say what I'm saying. We're listening. And hey, yeah, that's the Rock. It's the Rock. And you've got to be the Toronto Rock outside of the city. No matter how crass that sounded, saying people think you're Hamilton, Bermuda, that's exactly correct. That happened with the NHL in the early day, in the 92 expansion, 90 expansion. And they were told that. And Don Cherry addressed that when he helped the team out. He was willing to go into cities and explain what Hamilton was and say, essentially, it's Toronto. You're not going to go into Denver. You're not going to go into Fort Worth. You're not going to go into Philly and say Hamilton. You aren't.
Yeah, I think they give the Toronto Rock name a chance for a couple of seasons. They figure out whether it's going to stick or not. But if they can get the Rock, the individual, involved with the Rock, the team, it's a no-brainer. The marketing and branding power behind him, and if he's interested at all, that's a no-brainer.
Slide the Rock out of the name when you're referring, or the Toronto out of the name when you're referring to them, and then by the second year, have Toronto off the sweaters. Just have Rock. You can do that. You always come up with new sweaters. They sell.
Yes or no? As we wrap up, yes or no? The deal right now is 5 years. I know they can extend it, but the deal is for 5 years at First Ontario Centre. Steve Milton, will the Rock or the Toronto Rock or the Hamilton Rock or whatever, will the team be playing at First Ontario Centre in 5 years?
Yes, I think they will, partly because there's going to be a new arena there.
Rick?
Yes, and I'm very excited about that last part. Let's do it.
That's a whole other discussion, because you're moving into a new arena, and then all of a sudden you could have major renovations and maybe relocated for a while, but that's a discussion for another day if that one comes up. Another complication, a wrinkle in the ointment. No, it's not a wrinkle in the ointment, it's a fly. Ointments are supposed to prevent wrinkles, but anyway, you get the point. What do you think? Like the idea of the Rock coming? Like the name? Don't like the name? Will they be playing here 5 years? A lot of questions going on in this one. Let us know. Comment down below, subscribe down below, hit the notification bell so you know when these are coming out. We do them often. We'd love to talk to you soon. Take care.